Just a couple of announcements. First of all, I want to tell you about a great book that I'm reading called Fear of a Microbial Planet. We're going to cover this in Advanced Study, which is our Healthy Book Club. It's written by Steve Templeton. It's an easy book to read. It's very well referenced, and there are, I think, close to 1,000 references in the book, but it's really about a great history of pandemics and viruses and scourges. It goes all the way back to the medieval times, and fascinating book. And then carrying through to today's COVID. So highly recommend, and we'll be spending a few hours talking about it in just a couple of weeks. Our conference is this weekend, so if you're not registered, this is last chance. We have a great lineup of health experts talking about all manner of things, ranging from psychological health to Ayurvedic medicine to the new weight loss drugs and what you should be cautious of there. Optimal Health 1 and 2, the 2 weekends that I offer only once per year. You either take them in the next few weeks, or we don't have another chance until next fall. And then shelf-stable food, don't forget that. Anyhow, lots going on at Wellness Forum. Check out our online calendar at WellnessForumHealth.com. And of course, send me an email at pampopper@msn.com if you want to know more about any of the things that I'm talking about here. The information I am going to share with you today is, I won't say it's shocking, but it's just like, just when you think you know how bad things are in medicine, you find out it's actually worse. So I'll just start with this. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, 22 national quality strategy is described as, quote, an ambitious long-term initiative that aims to promote the highest quality outcomes and safest care for all individuals. And boy, does that sound great. And it would be great if there were any possible way for this initiative to fulfill its promises. But when you look at the way that the system is set up and how it reimburses doctors, it's almost impossible for those goals to be achieved. And I think that's kind of typical of government programs. And so I've been talking about decentralizing in medicine, going back to independent practice. And I think that what I'm going to share with you today will tell you why we really have to do it. And it's all about why more doctors aren't telling their patients detailed information about diet and lifestyle change. So I'll start by saying it's clear that there's general agreement about the value of diet and lifestyle change. I don't find anybody who wants to argue against it. Clinical practice guidelines for a lot of chronic diseases recommend lifestyle intervention as the first and the best treatment. Diet alone has been proven to reduce or reverse type 2 diabetes in just a matter of weeks. Plasma cholesterol and blood pressure generally drop like a rock after adoption of a plant-based diet and exercise. And diet and exercise remain the best options for weight loss. I realize I sound like a dinosaur when I say that, but really better for you than Ozempic and other drugs that are being offered right now. The problem is that, first, there are no quality measures in place that consider diet and lifestyle education and habit change. In fact, physicians can even be penalized for focusing on diet and lifestyle intervention. And the reason is that clinicians are rewarded for outcomes like adherence to medication, regardless of whether or not the patient experiences any health improvement at all. In other words, the people that are in charge of reimbursement, or the systems, I should say, I don't think individual people play much of a role in this, really don't recognize the value of health improvement. Additionally, diet and lifestyle education require more time with patients than most medical institutions will allocate, which incentivizes doctors to prescribe instead of counsel patients about better options. In fact, in most cases, patients aren't informed about diet and lifestyle change as an option or an alternative to medication. So they're not properly informed. And one of the things that you hear often, and this is just kind of an aside from the primary issue here, is people will say, well, Americans just don't want to change their diet. They don't want to exercise. Well, I don't think that that's necessarily true, but to the extent that it's not even being offered by their trusted medical advisors, that might be contributing to that thought as well. Lifestyle medicine is now considered a medical specialty, and since certification began in 2017, about 2,500 physicians have become board certified. In addition to the limitations already mentioned, a survey found that over half of lifestyle medicine clinicians who obviously got that board certification because they want to practice lifestyle medicine are not getting any reimbursement at all when they offer these types of services. And some offer so little money that it's almost impossible to deliver the services for the fee that the government is willing to pay. Now, one that is reimbursed adequately is intensive cardiac rehabilitation. It's underutilized, it's limited to a small percentage of patients, but here's the thing: patients have to copay for visits. Numerous visits are required in order for cardiac rehab to work. So, this is just another barrier because if the patient can't afford the copays, then it doesn't really matter how much the doctor is getting reimbursed. The prescribing of statins is an example of how perverse the system has become. So, this is a real story that was related in a MedPage or Medscape article. A lifestyle medicine primary care physician had a patient covered by Medicare Advantage who was diagnosed with high cholesterol. The patient's cholesterol was 226 and triglycerides were at 132. So, instead of just prescribing a routine statin, the physician prescribed lifestyle behavior modifications. Within 3 weeks, the patient's total cholesterol dropped to 171, triglycerides were down to 75, which is probably great success. The patient was delighted. However, the CMS 5-star rating system gave the primary care physician a grade of C rather than A, which put the 5-star rating at risk. Why? Because the system bases its score largely on medication compliance. The physician was therefore penalized despite achieving the optimal health outcome at a lower cost than would have been the case with medication. So this obviously doesn't incentivize patient-centered care because it disregards patient preference and it puts the doctor's reputation at risk. So Medicare incentivizes doctors to manage patients' health rather than to reverse disease. Now, another perverse incentive is payment based on the patient's health status. The sicker the patient, the more Medicare pays because it's expected, logically, that there will be more cost for that patient. So, a patient who has type 2 diabetes that goes away as a result of diet change, the doctor ends up being penalized because diabetes isn't any longer listed on the list of conditions that the patient has, so Medicare pays the doc less money. So this incentivizes managing the disease rather than a goal of remission. So there are 2,500 different quality measures for doctors to pay attention to, and how any doctor pays attention to even a fraction of them is beyond comprehension, right? And by the way, curing the patient isn't one of those quality measures. So I mentioned before, decentralization, getting doctors into their own practice is important. And the way that this evolved, by the way, I want to make something really clear. The drug companies did not get together and put these standardized guidelines together. This all resulted from the Affordable Care Act, that 2,000 plus page document that we had to pass before we could read it. Well, one of the things that was in it was the idea that there would be a centralized repository of best practices, and then this would become the uniform way in which medicine would be practiced. And that all sounds really good, but when you take judgment out of the picture, when you take time spent to get to know the patient out of the picture, and being evaluated on better outcomes out of the picture, you end up with disaster. This is what happens when a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington start managing your health through metrics like this. So what we need is an independent system. And on November 15th, I'm going to hold a workshop for practitioners of any type, dietitians, doctors, nurses, whatever. And we're going to have some discussion about, first of all, the regulatory scheme for licensure schemes, which are ridiculous. That's another whole problem. But also the steps that have to be taken in order to get to this decentralization, because people have this ridiculous notion that you're just going to walk out of the medical institution, set up over here, patients will just go to a different address and it'll all be swell. And that is not how it's going to work at all. That won't help anything. So there are some specific steps to take. But one thing I think that this type of information does is it helps you to have a little compassion for doctors, many of whom I think would like to do more of the right types of things, but they can't make it work. The center that they work for won't let them schedule longer appointments. There's no reimbursement. And here's another thing that came out when I started looking into this stuff too. For a physician, diet and lifestyle change requires follow-up. If we have a dietitian in our office who works with our patients on diet and menu plans and that sort of thing, and it's very time-consuming, and it's also one of the most important things that we do with the people who come to us for health advice. There's no reimbursement for anybody else, so now the doctor either has to do it all under these god-awful circumstances that I described to you, or it isn't going to happen. So all this to say, a new system is needed. We really want to be part of that. And we'll talk about it on the 15th, and you're going to hear a whole lot about it in the coming months after that, because the country is going to continue to go down the tubes from a health perspective until we start turning this ship around in a comprehensive, systemic way. All right, so that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. And I'll be back to you tomorrow with more news. Thank you for watching.